Python tutorial. This is the self-taught programmer here, and today we're going to be talking about file handling in Python. What are files? Files are locations on disk that let you store information on a permanent basis. By permanent, what I mean is you would be able to possibly turn off your computer, turn it back on again, and you should still be able to access the information that you stored in a file. And normally what happens is computers have something called random access memory, where you store your necessary data for computation. Now this random access memory is volatile, which means that if you were to go ahead and switch off your computer, or if it were to just go ahead and crash, you would lose all the data in the memory, and there would actually be no way to recover that data back. This is where files are very significant. If you were to have an operation where you continuously store information in an application, for example, let's say you are constantly getting your website accessed by millions of users, and you want to keep a track record of countries that these users are from. You could keep a track of that in memory, but if your application were to crash, all of that data will be gone. Now, if you were to go ahead and save that information parallelly to a file, you would be able to reboot your application and re-access the data. So the key point to remember is reusability, even if something goes wrong. So Python offers the possibility of performing a few operations on files, namely reading, writing, creating, and appending to files. Let's see how you read files in Python. For the sake of this tutorial, I created a sample file of certain dictionary words that I call words.txt. It contains some example words from A right down to Z. And I think there are about 235,886 words as of now. Cool. Let's go ahead and see how we can read this particular file. So to read a file in Python, you use the convention of F to refer to a file pointer to the file. You use the open keyword and you give it the file name. Now, the important thing to remember here is that the open method accepts as an argument the path to the file. Now, in this case, the file, the text file words.txt exists in the same directory from where I'm running the script. So the interpreter is smart enough to figure out the actual location on disk for the file and point to it. If, however, it were to reside in a different directory, we would have to actually specify the path to that file. Anyways, for the sake of this tutorial, this is all fine and dandy. So let's just go ahead and open this file. So when you go ahead and open this file, the default mode is read and the default reading mode is text mode, meaning which is going to open this file for read only, and it's going to assume that this file is a text file. Now in Unix environments, it doesn't really matter what file ending you give to the files, but it's somewhat important in case of Windows-based environments. Anyways, since I'm on a Mac, it doesn't really matter, and this particular method is going to assume that this is a text file that it is looking at. Now, once you define opening in this way, the variable f actually gets a reference to this open file, and then it provides us certain methods or API calls to do different stuff. The very first method is readLine, that lets us read line by line the contents of the file. So if I were to go ahead and invoke readLine for the first time, I would get the very first entry, which matches the very first entry of the file words.txt, which is A with a /n, the new line character. Now, if I were to go ahead and invoke this again, I would get the subsequent entries of the file. So as you can see, I'm able to iterate through each of the entries of this file. Now, if I want to go ahead and read all the contents of the file in one go, I have another method called read lines. As the name suggests, it lets you read all of the contents together in one go and presents you the result as a list. So we go ahead and we save this in a variable called lines and we invoke it so. Well, let's print out lines. Or let's print out the number of lines that we read, right? Yep. Okay. This didn't match the number of words that we saw, right? The number of words that we saw was 235,886. The reason is we invoked f.readline, I think 4 times, to iterate through the contents of the file. So what happened is, for each call to readline, the file pointer was moved by 1 position forward. If I were to go ahead and close this file and open it again for reading, this time I would get the right result. So this is an important thing to remember. Any invocation to readline will read you the particular line that you are looking for, but it will also move the file pointer by 1 position forward. So remember this when you are doing operations on files with Python. Anyways, we got all our stuff in the lines that we wanted. Let's inspect the contents. Let's see the first entry. As expected, it matches the first entry from the file. If I were to go ahead and inspect the last entry, I would use a reverse indexing, and in Python -1 lets you refer to the very last element of the list. So let's go ahead and print the last entry, which matches the last entry of the words.txt file. Cool. Now let's say we want to create a file but store some contents in it. How would you go ahead and do that? Let's say we took the first 50 lines and we want to store it in a separate file. How you would do that is you would go ahead, open another file with the name that you want to, and you would append it in write mode. You go ahead and write each individual line into the file. Oh, cool. Okay. Now if I were to go ahead and inspect the contents of this file, let's actually do that on the shell. Okay. We see that the words50 file was created. Okay. It doesn't have any entries though, so we must have done something wrong. So this is important. You might run into issues, but we need to see what happened here. Cool. So it is printing the line, but it didn't write that particular line. Cool. Let's see what the issue was. Okay, now it did write. So I think I didn't hit the enter then, but as you can see, it goes over each individual line and then just writes it to the file on disk. Now if I were to go ahead and want to do it in one go, I have that possibility too. So let's go ahead and remove that file that we just created. What you can do is you can just invoke the f.writeLines method that takes in a list or an iterable as its argument and simply writes it to disk. So if I were to go ahead and cat the words50, I don't see anything here. Okay, I see it now. So f.writeLines basically accepts an iterable and writes all of that to disk. So this was a tutorial on file handling in Python. I hope you enjoyed it. Go ahead and hit the like button if you did so. Share it with your friends. And until next time, happy programming. See you next time. Bye bye.